What if the hero everyone thought was dead walked back onto the runway one night? For 7 years, Captain Rachel Vega, callsign Night Raven, was a ghost, declared Kia after a Black Ops crash no one survived. But when she reappears under the floodlights, wearing the same flight jacket they buried her for, everything changes. Because sometimes, the most powerful legends don't stay buried, they come back to train the next generation. Welcome to my channel. They say Houston's airfield ghosts don't stay grounded for long, and I should know. I saw one walk across the tarmac under floodlights, wrapped in a leather flight jacket that hadn't seen daylight in 7 years. That ghost was me. My name's Captain Rachel Vega, callsign Night Raven, and for a long time, the world thought I was dead. Declared Kia during a Black Ops sortie over the Caucasus. No body, no beacon, just scattered debris and a folded flag handed to my sister at a funeral I wasn't supposed to attend. But I was there, hidden in the back pew, sunglasses on, collar high, watching as my name was etched in stone and my squadron saluted the air where I should have stood. Tonight, I walked across that same runway. The floodlights hit my face as I stepped out from behind an old maintenance hangar at Johnson Field. My boots struck the concrete in rhythm with my heartbeat, the sound steady despite the hurricane inside my chest. A group of young pilots stood gathered near the memorial wall, their voices low, laughter easy. Most of them hadn't flown with me. A few probably didn't believe half the stories. Until I showed up. A cocky voice rang out, Lieutenant Derek West, no older than 25 and wearing swagger like a second uniform. Relax, it's just some fan in a cosplay jacket. Probably watches too many old recruitment videos. A veteran near him snapped, show some respect? That's Night Raven's flight jacket. More laughter followed, until I stepped under the light. And then, silence. Absolute, pin-drop silence. It wasn't just the jacket that stopped them. It was my face. My presence. I didn't belong in the land of the living, not according to the granite wall behind them. And yet here I was, as real as the boots on my feet and the scar under my left eye earned in a crash that nobody ever debriefed. Major Connors, my old squadron leader, stood front and center. Whiskey in hand, words halfway through a toast. He dropped the glass, and it shattered like thunder across the tarmac. Holy hell, someone whispered. That's her. It took a moment, but Connors finally found his voice. Rachel? I stopped 3 feet from him, gave a half salute like we used to before early sorties. Evening, Falcon 6. Sorry I'm late. And that's when the whisper started. Not about my return, but about what it meant. Because people don't come back from where I've been unless they were never gone to begin with. Not really. You could feel the shift, like the wind had changed direction. The laughter was gone. In its place, silence, heavy as steel. I stood there, eyes scanning the crowd. Most didn't recognize me. I expected that. I'd spent the last 7 years living under aliases, flying in skies that didn't officially exist. But the older faces, those who'd flown with me, they were the ones I came for. Major Connors looked like he'd seen a ghost, which I suppose I was. The lines around his eyes had deepened, his shoulders broader now. But his posture still screamed pilot, and his eyes hadn't lost that edge. He stepped closer. You're supposed to be. I know what I'm supposed to be, I said gently. Lieutenant West, the loud one, opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to argue. But I cut him off with a look. He clamped his mouth shut. Probably the smartest thing he'd done all night. The crowd had gathered near the memorial wall, where my name was etched in black marble under the inscription, "In valor, they soared." The letters stared back at me like a bad joke. You were at your own funeral, Connors finally said. Not a question. Just the quiet horror of realization. I nodded. Front row would have been too risky. He swayed slightly, as if some internal compass had broken. Jesus, Rachel, why now? That question sat in the air, waiting. And I didn't answer, not yet. Instead, I walked toward the wall. My name was third from the top, just under Lieutenant Marcus Hale and above Staff Sergeant Lino Ortiz. Good people. Real heroes. I traced the edge of my name with a gloved finger. The chill of the stone seeped through the leather. I earned this spot, I said softly. I know, Connors whispered. The younger pilots were still murmuring. I caught fragments. Is this some kind of a psyop? No way she's real. Dude, that's Night Raven. From the Montenegro raid. My uncle flew recon that night, swore she could fly sideways through a thunderstorm. I turned around, watching the ripple through them. For some of them, I was a myth, a story passed around barracks to explain impossible missions. For others, I was a name carved in stone. Until tonight. A female voice broke the tension. "Ma'am," she said. "Lieutenant Emery. Flight Team Echo 3. I turned to face her. "I studied your strike runs at Bagram. The ones they declassified. Well, kind of. You taught a generation of pilots how to fly under radar and out of hell. They said you vanished without a trace." "They weren't wrong," I said. "But sometimes, ghosts know how to find their way back." The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was reverent. I wasn't just a returee now. I was proof that sometimes the story doesn't end where they say it does. Major Connors looked like he was trying to find ground beneath his feet. Are you staying?" I didn't answer right away. Because truth was, I didn't know. I'd spent 7 years hiding. Hiding from the people I loved. Hiding from who I was. Coming back wasn't just a mission, it was a choice. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to live with it. But what I did know, I was done hiding. They say war leaves marks on your body, but the real scars? They're on your choices. 7 years ago, on a night no one was supposed to talk about, I took off from an airstrip in the Caucasus Mountains under a cloudless sky and a veil of secrecy. Mission parameters were tight. No comms, no backup, no margin for error. Our squadron, Falcon Squadron 7, had been tasked with intercepting a rogue weapons convoy that didn't officially exist, moving through a corridor we weren't officially allowed to enter. We were ghosts before we even left the runway. My bird was a prototype: stealth, speed, firepower. I'd helped test her myself. No call sign, no markings. Just black paint, curved metal, and a hum in the engine that sounded like a whisper. I was flying low over the valley when the sky lit up with anti-air fire. The missile lock was sudden, violent, and final. No chance to eject. No flares. Just one last breath and a plummet into a frozen ravine. Except I didn't die. I woke up in a freezing cave, ribs shattered, head ringing. I don't know how long I lay there, but when the shadows moved, I expected death. Instead, I got something worse. Capture. A private militia, well-funded, ideologically fractured, brutal, dragged me out and kept me somewhere dark and uncharted for 4 months. I wasn't a pilot anymore. I was leverage. They didn't want ransom. They wanted information, optics, leverage in a geopolitical game so classified it made even my intel briefing look like a comic book. But I didn't break. At least, not the way they wanted. Eventually, a joint extraction team pulled me out, special forces and some agency guys who wore no flags and had no names. The world never knew. The DoD called it a successful denial campaign. My death? A necessary lie. The woman who climbed onto that extraction chopper wasn't Captain Vega anymore. She was a file buried under 10 feet of clearance tape and burned folders. I was offered a choice: fade into quiet obscurity or serve again. Not with medals and flags, but behind walls no one sees. Deep black operations. Full deniability. Tactical advisement on missions that would never see the light of day. I chose the shadows. And for the next 7 years, I was a ghost in the truest sense. Sometimes I guided drone strikes. Sometimes I flew recon in aircraft that didn't exist. Once, I walked into a hostile airfield wearing a stolen colonel's uniform, carrying a thumb drive the size of a stick of gum. I've had meals in 12 countries and identities in twice as many. But no home. No name. Until now. The program, what we called Wraith Command, was officially dissolved 3 weeks ago. Mission logs destroyed. Operatives scrubbed clean. Most went underground or disappeared altogether. But me? I chose to come back. Not because I was tired. Not because I missed the noise. But because I had to know if there was still a place for Rachel Vega in the world she left behind. That's why I was standing here tonight, under Texas sky, facing the ghosts of my past. "Where have you been?" Connors finally asked. I looked him dead in the eye. Saving people who will never know I existed. It wasn't the floodlights or the shocked faces that made me feel exposed. It was the smell. Jet fuel, hot asphalt, all-soaked canvas. Familiar. Too familiar. This place, this base, was stitched into my DNA. I knew which hangar door stuck in the winter. Which vending machine spat out sodas without taking a dollar. I remembered the exact spot near the east fence where, once upon a younger life, I sat with Lena Ortiz and watched the sunrise after our first joint sortie. But tonight, all of that felt borrowed. Like I was walking through a museum exhibit of my own life. The brass hadn't shown up yet, but I knew they would. Once word got out that Night Raven had walked out of the shadows and onto U.S. soil, the Pentagon's phone tree probably caught fire. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not without handlers. Not without signatures and silence agreements. But sometimes, a ghost has to break its own chains. Connors motioned me toward the edge of the tarmac, away from the stunned crowd. He didn't say anything, just walked. I followed. We stopped beside a metal bench near the flight crew lockers. It was scratched, sun-bleached, forgotten. He sat. So did I. For a long minute, nothing but the wind and the distant thrum of a hangar generator. I read your eulogy, he finally said, staring straight ahead. I blinked. I know. I heard it. His head turned slowly. You were there. Back row. In civilian clothes. Dark glasses. The folded flag almost broke me. His jaw clenched. He didn't speak for a long moment. I thought I saw you, he said. But I convinced myself it was grief playing tricks. I offered a weak smile. Grief's funny like that. Another silence passed between us. Why now? He asked again. Why tonight? That question had 1,000 answers. I needed to remember I was real, I said finally. Not just a shadow in a black file. He turned to me, something raw and cracked in his voice. We needed you too, Rachel. This squadron hell, this whole damn unit, has never flown the same. I didn't know what to say. I didn't come back for medals. I didn't expect a welcome mat. But that look in his eyes? That hit harder than a missile lock. Suddenly, the crunch of gravel behind us. A young voice, ma'am? I turned. It was West again, Lieutenant Loudmouth. Except this time, the smirk was gone. His posture was rigid, almost nervous. I owe you an apology, he said, eyes lowered. Back there I didn't know who you were. I didn't know you were. You. I stood. Walked toward him. I was 25 once, I said, softly. Thought I knew everything. Truth is, you don't know a damn thing until you lose something you can't get back. He nodded once, then glanced down at the patch on my shoulder. You really flew the Montenegro run? He asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a black patch, my old unit insignia. A raven, wings flared, midnight blue on charcoal. I handed it to him. His eyes went wide. Is this a real one? I said. No replicas. No replicas could survive what that one's seen. West didn't move. Didn't even breathe. It's yours now, I said. Not because you've earned it yet, but because someday you will. And when you do, I want you to remember who carried it before you. He swallowed hard, then saluted. Thank you, ma'am. I returned it. Not as Captain Vega. As something more. As someone alive. It's a strange thing, looking at your own name carved in granite. I stood there after the crowd began to scatter, their voices hushed, glances lingering. Some whispered, some pointed, but none dared approach. Even the skeptical ones, Lieutenant West included, kept a respectful distance now. That's the funny thing about legends. They don't need proof. They just need to show up. The air had cooled slightly. Houston's heat always broke this way, like it remembered mercy just in time. Major Connors joined me again at the wall. Neither of us said anything for a while. The breeze moved through the floodlights like slow waves. I never knew what happened, he finally murmured. I traced the edge of the letter V in my name. You weren't supposed to. He nodded slowly. We tried everything. Drones. Search and rescue. Infrared sweeps. There was debris. No beacon. There wasn't meant to be, I said, quieter than before. The aircraft was designed that way. No black box. No trace. If it went down, it stayed down. You weren't flying a prototype, were you? I looked over at him. Not just flying it. I helped build it. His eyebrows lifted, but he didn't push. Just waited. So I told him. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. About the crash. The months in captivity. The extraction team that didn't wear flags. The afterlife that wasn't heaven or hell, just briefing rooms with no clocks and missions scribbled on napkins. When I finished, Connors looked like someone had turned gravity back on him. Jesus, Rachel, he said softly. That's not a tour. That's exile. I volunteered, I said. Didn't feel like a sacrifice then. Felt like the only way to matter. He looked away, jaw clenched. Some of us still needed you, he said. I wanted to tell him I'd needed them too. That every day in the shadows had carried a weight I never fully shook. That hearing my own name again tonight had hit harder than any explosion. But I didn't say any of that. I just said, I know. That was when the convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs. Civilian plates, military precision. I knew the rhythm of that sound, engines idling in sync, tires crunching on old concrete. Men in suits stepped out. Clean haircuts, comms in their ears. You don't forget those silhouettes. Not when you've served in the places I have. They were here for me. The tallest one, silver hair, gray suit, eyes that never blinked, approached with a slow, careful stride. The base's security team trailed behind, clearly nervous about how to handle whatever this was. The man stopped 10 feet from me, hands visible, voice low. "Captain Vega." "Technically," I said, "I don't exist." He gave a small nod. "Then technically, you're not being detained. We'd like a conversation." "About what?" "About what you saw. What you might still know." Connors stepped forward. "She's on base. You'll talk to her in my office." The man in gray raised an eyebrow but didn't object. "Fair enough. No cuffs. No escorts. Just answers." I turned to Connors. "Still got the keys to the old flight briefing room?" He gave me a look. "Never gave them up." As we walked toward the base buildings, the gray man fell into step beside me. "I'll be honest," he said. "We expected you to disappear." "I almost did. But you didn't." I glanced at him. "Yeah. And now the world has to deal with the fact that ghosts don't always stay buried." The old briefing room hadn't changed much. Same scarred conference table. Same humming fluorescent lights. Even the same faint smell of burnt coffee grounds and WD-40. Connors flicked on the overhead projector out of habit, then turned it back off. No one needed a slideshow tonight. The gray-suited man sat across from me, setting a slim metal case on the table with a quiet click. Behind him stood a younger analyst type, nervous, wiry, carrying a tablet like it was a shield. "Let's start simple," the senior one said. "When did you know the Wraith program was burned?" "About 3 weeks ago," I said. My handler vanished. Drop sites went dead. No more encrypted packets. Just silence. "You were compromised?" I shook my head. "Never made contact after extraction. Protocol was burn and disappear. I was clean." He nodded, tapping a code onto his case and opening it. Inside was a single folder. Yes, paper and a photograph. He slid it toward me. I recognized it instantly. A cargo plane, matte gray, no identifiers. Flying low over eastern Nevada, days before I returned. "You intercepted them," he said. "Did you realize what you were looking at?" "I had a hunch," I replied. They were using a corridor that hadn't been in use since Phantom Gray. ECM signatures were dirty, but familiar. Connors frowned. "Phantom Gray. It was a test range built for ghost ops during the cold iron years," I said. "But the layout, the routes, it was ours. No way some civilian crew just stumbled into that corridor." The analyst leaned forward, uncertain. "What do you mean ours?" "Legacy flight patterns," I explained. "We trained in them because no satellite could trace them clearly during certain seasons. Cold pockets and signal scatter make them invisible at low altitude." Connors whistled low. "You think they were trained?" "I don't think," I said. "I know. I flew that pattern blindfolded in 17. The man in gray looked at his analyst, who began frantically tapping. "We had surveillance," the analyst muttered. "But the ECM scrambled half our feeds. Thermal junk. Radar reflections only." I leaned back in my chair. "Which means I'm probably the only person who saw that plane clearly." "And?" the senior agent asked. "Modified airframe. Military-grade discipline. And something else. They were testing response time. They weren't just running product. They were baiting protocols, trying to see what we'd send after them." The room went quiet. "That's why I came back," I added. "Because whoever's flying that corridor, they're using our tactics. Our black box manuals. Hell, they even banked like Wraith pilots. We trained for silence. These guys, they're building echoes." The gray man sat very still, then said, "We thought this operation had been fully dismantled." "It wasn't," I said. "It was inherited." Connors stood, arms crossed. "So what happens now?" The agent looked at me, then finally asked the question I'd been expecting since I stepped off the tarmac. "Would you be willing to come back, as an advisor? Unofficially. Off-grid. No press. No ceremony. We need someone who understands the old systems. The old ghosts." I stared at him, the weight of the years pressing down. "I've already come back," I said. "Question is, are you ready to believe that ghosts don't always vanish? Sometimes we just wait for the right fight." He didn't smile, but he nodded. Behind him, the analyst looked stunned. "You're really her," he said, almost reverently. "The one from Operation Wild Signal. The one who flew under radar across the Bosporus." "That wasn't a story," I said. "It was a job." Connors smiled faintly. "And now you've got another one." I didn't sleep that night. Too many gears turning in my head. Too many echoes of jet engines, intercepted chatter, old friends, and older ghosts. Connors offered me a bunk in the officer quarters, but I couldn't bring myself to step into a room with pressed sheets and framed protocol posters. I'd been sleeping on cots and under stars for too long, so I found a spot in the old hangar instead. Falcon Squadron's maintenance bay had once been my second home, and even after all these years, it still smelled like jet fuel and victory. My flight suit was still stiff with sweat and desert dust, but I sat cross-legged on the cool floor beside a grounded F-16, tracing the outline of a grease-streaked floor tile with my boot. Then I heard it, soft footsteps. Lieutenant Emery, the one who'd called me ma'am, like it meant something. She stood a few paces away, holding a steaming mug. Coffee, she said. Figured you weren't the sleeping type. I took it grateful. You'd be right. She lingered near the wing of the F-16. I looked you up, she said. After the ceremony. You won't find much, I replied. No, she said, but I found enough. And I asked my uncle. He flew E-3 Sentry Overwatch on your Baku run. He said he never saw anyone thread through those missiles like you did. Called it art. I raised an eyebrow. Your uncle talks a lot. Only about legends, she said. Then, why did they let the world think you were dead? I stared into the coffee. Because for a long time, I was. She didn't ask what that meant. Just nodded. After a while, she said quietly, the young guys, they still don't get it. But the older ones? They haven't stopped talking since last night. It's like you plugged something back in. I chuckled. Not sure they needed plugging in. They've kept the lights on this long. Yeah, she said. But you reminded them why. That one hit deeper than I expected. I stood, knees creaking slightly. 7 years in the shadows build strength, but it takes a toll. Emery looked at me the way you look at a mountain that just shrugged off an avalanche. You're staying, right? She asked. For now, I said. They need someone who knows the old ways. The analog instincts. How to feel lift before you see it on a screen. You mean real flying? I smiled. That's what they used to call it. As the sun cracked over the horizon, we walked toward the end of the hangar, where the aircraft lined up like sentinels. Falcon Squadron's warbirds, sleek, sharp, with digital bones but old-school attitude. I ran my hand along the nose of a Falcon jet. It vibrated softly beneath my palm, as if it knew. You know what the best pilots have in common? I asked Emery. What? They listen, not just to radios or instruments, but to the plane, to the wind, to the silence between seconds. She didn't answer. She just stood beside me and looked out over the runway like it was sacred ground. And in a way it was. Because here, I wasn't just a ghost. I was home. The invitation came the next day, paper thin and digital all at once. A discrete file slid into Falcon Base's comm server at 0420. Encrypted. Level Omega access. Titled only, Project Emberglass. Declassification Proposal, Advisory Brief. And below it, one name typed in plain, unflinching font. Captain Rachel Vega, Ret. I opened it in Connor's office, where the light always buzzed half a second before flickering on. He stood behind me, arms crossed. You expecting this? He asked. No, I said. But I'm not surprised. Inside the file was the full download on what I'd suspected since I saw that rogue plane. Wraith Command's protocols were being re-engineered. Illegally. Tactics once used to protect national secrets were now floating around on the black market, sold in pieces to shadow orgs trying to weaponize invisibility. The document didn't ask me to stop them. Not yet. It asked me to verify what I saw, to confirm that what I chased over Nevada wasn't a fluke. And in smaller print, to advise on countermeasures for threats employing analog tactical ghost systems. That was fancy talk for, we need your brain. Maybe your hands. You're going to take it. Connors said, more statement than question. I didn't answer right away, because taking that offer meant walking back into the world that erased me. It meant stepping off the tarmac and into the shadows again, this time not as an asset, but as a mentor, a bridge between eras. It doesn't end, does it? I finally said. Connors sighed. Not for people like us. Later that day, I stood at the ready line with a squad of new recruits. Some were barely shaving. Others had the stiff posture of academy grads, still smelling faintly of starch and self-doubt. Lieutenant Emery stood front and center. She was wearing a new patch on her flight suit, a raven over a horizon. My old insignia, slightly redesigned. Not to honor me, but to honor the idea I represented. You ready for this? I asked her quietly before we began. She nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. I stepped forward. The group straightened instinctively. Discipline was muscle memory out here. Most of you only know me by a call sign, I began. Night Raven. Maybe you've heard stories. Maybe you've Googled a few ghost files and thought I was just a name carved in stone. I looked them over. But I didn't come back to tell war stories. I came back to make sure you don't become one. That got their attention. You've got the most advanced aircraft ever built. Digital HUDs, auto-throttle, redundant backups for your backups. But let me tell you something. I stepped toward the nose of the nearest bird. None of that matters if you forget how to feel the sky. They were silent now. Your ancestors flew open cockpit, canvas-winged nightmares over battlefields they could barely pronounce. My generation flew black jets through radar fences with no safety nets. You'll fight battles we can't even imagine yet. I paused, let the words hang in the hot air. So if you remember anything from this briefing, remember this. When the systems go dark, when the satellites blink out, when the comms fall silent, it'll just be you, the stick, and the wind. No one blinked. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to be present. That's what saves lives. That's what brings your squad home. Emery stepped up beside me, her voice clear. Class is dismissed. Debrief at 1600. They saluted. I returned it. As they filed out, she stayed behind. They'll never forget that, she said. Neither will I. 6 months later, I found myself standing under the same Texas sky where I'd first come back from the dead. Only now, there was music playing. Not the national anthem. Not a somber dirge. Just the low, steady hum of string instruments over the PA and the soft rhythm of jet engines cooling down in the distance. Tonight wasn't a funeral. It was something else. They called it the Living Memorial. A new tradition at Falcon Squadron, born out of my return, but meant to honor all those who gave something more complicated than their lives. Those who gave up names, years, identities. Ghosts who walked among the living, and those who never made it back into the light. The squadron gathered at dusk in their dress uniforms, standing shoulder to shoulder near the granite wall where my name still rested. Still carved, still sacred, and I wouldn't let them change it. Connors had asked me 3 times over the past few months, "You sure you don't want us to update the memorial? Take the name off?" But I always said the same thing. That name belongs to the version of me who didn't come back. She made the sacrifice. I'm just her shadow, finally allowed to step out into the sun. So we left it. A symbol. A paradox. A reminder that not every fallen hero is gone. The ceremony was quiet, intimate, respectful. No cameras. No press. Just the people who got it. I stood at the podium, dressed not in a uniform, but in a charcoal flight jacket, no patch, no insignia. Just a silver wing pin over my heart. I looked out at the young faces. Pilots, techs, comms officers. A few old vets. Even the base commanders sat quietly in the back row. And I told them what I'd come to believe. When you sign up to serve, you imagine the worst thing that can happen is death, I said. But sometimes, the real sacrifice is living through what follows. I let that settle. No one stirred. You lose time, connection, the right to call home. You give up the chance to be remembered in exchange for the chance to protect people who will never know your name. My voice caught, but I didn't let it fall. There are ghosts among us. Not the haunted kind. The guardians. The ones who come back in pieces and put themselves together quietly, out of duty, not glory. I looked at the wall then. At my own name. There's a version of me that ended right there, 7 years ago. But if I'm standing here now, it's because someone gave me a second chance. A rescue team that didn't quit. A commander who didn't forget. A squadron that kept flying even when they thought the best of them was gone. I turned back to the crowd. You're not alone. And if you ever find yourself flying in silence, if the comms go dark and the skies get heavy, just remember. I stepped away from the mic. Sometimes the shadows are watching out for you. A beat of silence. Then a quiet, strong voice rose from the crowd, "Tonight, Raven." Others joined in, one by one, until the whole squadron echoed the call. "Tonight, Raven." Not as a ghost, but as something real. The ceremony ended just as the sky turned velvet. I stood alone for a moment after everyone else had gone, boots on the same cracked tarmac where I'd reappeared half a year earlier. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the mechanics powering down hangar bays. The sharp hiss of nitrogen tanks being sealed. The muffled clang of a dropped wrench echoing through steel. And then, silence. Real silence. Not the kind you find in bunkers or war rooms, but the kind that only exists between chapters of a life. I walked the perimeter one last time that night, hands in my jacket pockets, listening to the echo of my own steps. No one followed. No one needed to. These were the shadows I knew best. At the far edge of the base, just beyond the last row of floodlights, I reached the small path that led to the observation tower. The old one. The one we used back when we still tracked takeoffs with checklists on clipboards. They'd rebuilt most of the base since I'd vanished, but they left this tower alone. Maybe out of oversight. Maybe out of respect. Inside, I found what I'd hidden long ago, a tin box buried behind loose panels in the back wall. Inside it, a photo, me and Lena Ortiz, covered in oil and grinning like fools after our first solo flights. A coin with the Squadron seal. And a scrap of paper with a handwritten phrase from one of our instructors. Trust the sky. It never lies. I leaned against the window and looked out over the airfield. The jets were quiet now, dark silhouettes under moonlight. But the ghosts? They were never still. They flew in formation over every hangar, every runway, every name etched into that black granite wall. Some had fallen. Some had vanished. Some, like me, had returned. And some were still out there, serving silently in places that never make the news. People ask me sometimes, quietly, hesitantly, was it worth it? 7 years of silence. Of shadows. Of names I couldn't keep and friends I couldn't see. And I tell them, yes. Because I learned the truth of service. It isn't about being remembered. It's about protecting those who are. 6 weeks later, I got a message. Not from command. Not from the Pentagon. Just a small, encrypted ping from a private server I'd used during my last mission. The screen lit up with coordinates. Arctic edge. No call sign. No detail. I stared at it for a long time. Then I reached into my locker and pulled out my helmet. The same one from before. Scratched. Faded. The words Night Raven still ghosted along the edge in silver paint. I held it for a long time, then placed it carefully back on the shelf. Not this time. Let someone else fly that mission. Because I had another job now. At Falcon Air Base, a new generation of pilots was already climbing into their cockpits. They flew differently now, more aware. More precise. Not because they believed in legends, but because they'd met one. And that legend? She was exactly where she needed to be. Not in a file. Not in the shadows. But here on solid ground. Where ghosts didn't just haunt the past. They trained the future.